r/Nosleep. Posted by u/starbirthed. I worked at an abnormal sleep lab in college. These are my notes. Part, Subject A. While in my second year of college, I switched majors mid-semester and was told I needed to do extra credit in order to catch up. My options were to work in the tutoring department helping freshmen with psychology assignments, or to volunteer in the college's sleep laboratory. I chose the sleep lab because the hours worked better with my schedule, and I had always been interested in dreams. When I told my professor my decision, he made sure to emphasize I would need to start there right away. I said that was fine. He told me that the normal sleep studies were resuming in November, and that I would be working with the special cases. Special cases? I had wondered if I was qualified for such a thing. He assured me I'd be okay and would have both a professor and fellow students working alongside me, but it still felt like some kind of warning. I started that weekend. The quad was relatively quiet as I made my way over to the science building and descended the steps to the basement. The intake area was too bright, fluorescent lights burning my eyes. The student worker at the desk got me situated with a laminated badge and clipboard and sent me in to meet Dr. Julie Sinclair and the two other students, one a volunteer like me, and one an upperclassman who was working directly with Dr. Sinclair on his thesis. I was given a tour of the facility. Dr. Sinclair walked me through the sleeping quarters. There were beds with machines next to them, and soft amber lights that somehow made the place less intimidating. I asked about the sofas and table. Well, the subjects spend a few days here. They don't sleep the whole time. Dr. Sinclair gave me a wry smile. Not all of them, anyway, Rajiv, the upperclassman, corrected her. I wondered what he meant, but the tour moved on before I could ask. The next space was where the student volunteers sat. We were not allowed to interact with the sleep subjects, but would watch them through a two-way mirror and listen to their conversations with Rajiv and Dr. Sinclair through speakers that hung on the wall, surround sound style. There was no training, very little instruction. I was told to take thorough notes of everything that happened, with no analysis on my part until later on. I was to be a completely impartial observer. The fellow student volunteer, Becky, was to do the same. It has been many years since my time in the sleep lab. I was never allowed to take my notes home with me, but recently they showed up in a fat envelope on my doorstep. They had not been mailed but simply left there, as there was no postage stamp and nothing written on the outside. The package contained all the notes I had ever taken while working at the laboratory, and even had some of Becky's notes in it as well. Becky and I are still friends on social media, and when I messaged her about it, she seemed surprised. She didn't receive a similar package. I worked at the sleep laboratory for 3 years. Dr. Sinclair was so impressed with my note-taking that she set it up so I earned college credit for my time there. I was only asked there when she was working. She handled all the special cases. I never worked on the regular sleep studies, and I always sat in the hidden room. I never entered the sleep lab while a subject was in there. Well, only once. I have not heard from Dr. Sinclair since I graduated. She left the university shortly after and does not seem to have an online presence. I have not been able to track her down. I'm sharing my notes from all those years ago because I believe the story needs to get out there. I have changed the names of all the subjects to protect their privacy. Some details which could identify them have been altered, but none that will impact the data. In all honesty, I am hopeful that someone will see this, someone who knows how to get in touch with Dr. Julie Sinclair. Subject to Lillian. Name, Lillian. Age, 49. Occupation, dental hygienist. Lillian sits at a table in the lab with Dr. Sinclair and Rajiv. She is middle-aged, with short blonde hair and blue eyes. She wears a pink blouse and khaki pants. She appears friendly but a little nervous. Her hands are shaking, though she smiles frequently. I am told this is her second time here. Dr. Sinclair. Hello, Lillian. How have you been feeling? Lillian. Good. It's so nice to be here. Nervous laugh. Dr. Sinclair. You know we can only accomplish your goals if you're completely honest with us. Lillian becomes visibly uncomfortable. She tugs at her sleeves and looks down into her lap. Rajiv. It's okay, ma'am. We're here to help. Lillian. They're back. It's been every night this week. Rajiv. Really? Tell us everything. Lillian. It gets worse when I talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Dr. Sinclair. I know it feels difficult, but the more we know about them, the more effective the plan we make can be. A long pause of about 20 seconds follows. Rajiv makes a move to speak, but Dr. Sinclair holds out a hand to silence him. Lillian finally looks up. Lillian. It's the same as it was last time. I go to sleep, and they show up. Dr. Sinclair, Petey and the whale? Lillian, yes. Dr. Sinclair, do you find that your diet, or nightly routine, has had any impact? Lillian, I did all the things you suggested. It worked for a while. But like I said, the encounters started up again this week. Nothing I do seems to make a difference. Rajiv, and the encounters are all the same? Lillian, yes. Rajiv, please walk us through one of these encounters. Lillian, again? Dr. Sinclair, we just want to see if there are any variations since you were last here. Lillian, alright. There is a long pause of 1 minute and 22 seconds. Lillian gains her composure and raises her head to speak. Lillian, so I go to sleep in my bed. My husband goes to bed beside me. It doesn't matter if we go at the same time, or he goes first, or I do. Once the encounters start up, they happen every night. I read until I get tired. Then I turn off my light and fall asleep. Dr. Sinclair, what position do you sleep in? Lillian, on my back. Now I know they're coming, so I've been changing the routine up slightly. I pray instead of read. It's the only way I can fall asleep. Rajiv, have you tried sleeping at different times of day? Lillian, yes. Doesn't matter. They still come. Dr. Sinclair, please, go on. Lillian, I drift asleep and usually enter that place where I'm not awake, but not really asleep. I want to fall completely asleep, but never can. Once I realize, it's too late. They show up then. I hear them but never see them. Nothing but their silhouettes. Anyway. Another long pause follows. Lillian cries softly for a minute, and Dr. Sinclair offers her a box of tissues. She wipes her eyes, blows her nose, and then continues speaking. Lillian, they enter the room and I hear the footsteps creaking on the floorboards. I hear them talking about me. Petey, of course. Dr. Sinclair, the whale still hasn't spoken? Lillian, no. I hear him move and occasionally he'll grunt in response to Petey, but that's it. So I hear them discussing me. She'll make a good one, I know it. Come on, let's go for it. Let's grab her. And I hear them moving closer. The things they say change a little night by night, but it's always the same type of conversation. Petey wants to grab me, and he's trying to convince the whale to help. They argue for what feels like an hour. It goes on so long. Rajiv, they argue? I thought you said the whale doesn't talk. Lillian, he doesn't, but Petey seems to know what he wants or doesn't want. Petey says something and then there's a minute of silence, or maybe a small grunt, and then Petey says another thing like, oh, come on. Let's do it. Eventually, they come closer. I hear them move from the doorway to the foot of the bed. Petey's voice is so loud and grating. He stands back, and tells the whale what to do. Grab her legs. Good, like that. And I feel the whale grab me by the ankles. He pulls me out from under the blankets and I hit the floor. It hurts, and I scream out but my husband keeps on sleeping. Dr. Sinclair, you're doing great. Lillian, it feels repetitive. You're sure you need me to tell this again? It really hasn't changed. Dr. Sinclair, yes, please. Lillian, the whale drags me out of the bedroom and into the hall. I see vague shapes and outlines. Petey is laughing now, cackling. His voice moves away from me like he's going down the stairs. I grab onto the carpet but it's not thick enough. Did you know I went out and bought a shag rug? I thought maybe I'd be able to hold onto it better, when they grab me. Rajiv, it hasn't helped? Lillian, no. The whale's too strong. He drags me down the stairs, step by step, and I hit each one. The stairs are carpeted. I probably already told you that. But it doesn't matter. She pulls her sleeves back to reveal red marks on the backs of her arms. Lillian, rug burn. Dr. Sinclair and Rajiv each write something down. Lillian, we're down in the front hall now. The whale leaves me at the bottom of the steps. I can't really move. My limbs are so heavy. I'm there, and Petey's excited. I think he's jumping up and down. It's the same, every night. He tells the whale to open the front door. Dr. Sinclair suddenly glances up with an elevated intensity. She looks like she is about to say something, but then makes a note. Lillian, I hear the door open. I feel the wind coming in. And the whale comes back for me. I feel his hands around my ankles again. Petey's voice now sounds far away, like he's already outside. They're dragging me to the creek. Rajiv, the creek across from your house. Lillian, yes. But as soon as we get to the door, that's it. The neighbor's dog starts to bark. He's outside every night. I'm back in my bed and I'm awake. So, last time I was here at the lab, they didn't come. But they weren't visiting me in the days leading up to it. So I feel like they're going to show up, then. Dr. Sinclair, what's the longest string of encounters you've had? Lillian, 84. 85 nights. Dr. Sinclair, have you had a chance to think about what might have made the previous encounters with them stop? Lillian, my best guess is that I told them I wanted them to dump me in the creek. Dr. Sinclair, that's what you've said every time to make them stop? Lillian, no, just the last time. The other times they stopped on their own. Rajiv, and you said that to show them you weren't afraid? Lillian, I said that because I wanted it to be over. Rajiv, it meaning the encounters? Lillian, everything. There is a break while Dr. Sinclair and Rajiv talk off to the side. Lillian reads a magazine while she waits. Eventually, they reconvene. Dr. Sinclair, alright, Lillian. We'll get you set up in your quarters. It's not time to sleep yet, but we want to walk you through it so you can begin to get comfortable with where you'll be staying this time. Lillian is shown to the bed on the western wall. Dr. Sinclair and Rajiv demonstrate which machine she'll be hooked up to tonight. They show her the machine which will monitor her heart rate and breathing, and the small stickers that will be attached to her temples to monitor her brain waves. She lies down on the bed, and tells them it feels more comfortable than the one she had last time. Becky and I are given a quick break while Lillian eats dinner. After she eats and has some time to read quietly, Rajiv and Dr. Sinclair go back in and get her situated in bed. Dr. Sinclair instructs her to do everything as she normally would. Dr. Sinclair, alright, Lillian. Tonight we'll have you go into sleep like you regularly would. We'll collect some data based on your brain waves and breathing patterns, and then hear from you about your experience. Lillian, and tomorrow we can form a plan? Dr. Sinclair, if they come back, yes. Lillian, okay. They're probably going to come back. Dr. Sinclair, it's okay. You'll be safe here. Lillian, my husband says that too. She smiles sadly. I'm sorry. I'll try my best. Rajiv, let us know if you need anything. We can't give you any sedatives, but things to make you more comfortable. More pillows, blankets. Just let us know. Dr. Sinclair and Rajiv exit and join us in the observation room. There is a small machine to our left that allows them to keep an eye on Lillian's vitals. The lights in the sleeping quarters dim to just a soft glow. We wait for what feels like an hour. Rajiv gets us snacks from the vending machine in the lobby. The machine beeps, and Dr. Sinclair rises to check it. Dr. Sinclair, she's asleep. She's in the N1 stage. Rajiv, noted. Oh, look, there's the hypnic jerk. Lillian twitches in the bed on the western wall. It is mostly dark, but there is a dim outline visible from the small amber light across the way. Dr. Sinclair, alpha waves are down to 50%. Rajiv, she said the encounters happen a few minutes after she goes to sleep. Me, I decide to speak up, out of overwhelming curiosity. Isn't that impossible? I thought nightmares and sleep paralysis can only happen during the REM cycle. I immediately apologize for speaking up, but the others assure me it's okay as long as I am still taking notes. Becky frowns at me as though I have done the wrong thing, however. Dr. Sinclair, the reason we brought Lillian back in is because her husband told us the encounters happen anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes after she initially falls asleep. Me, how can he be sure? Rajiv, if what they're saying is true, we'll all be able to tell. I am surprised at how unscientific this seems, but I continue to observe and take notes. Dr. Sinclair, delta waves are beginning. Heart rate and body temperature down. Rajiv, N2 stage commencing. Lillian looks to be sleeping peacefully. She is on her back with a single blanket over her. Her arms are at her sides. Her stomach rises and falls very slowly now. We are all silent in the observation room, with only the occasional sound of the machines beeping. I watch through the mirror and wonder if someone turned off the night light. It is suddenly dark in the sleeping quarters. Dr. Sinclair, heart rate increasing. Rajiv, is she coming out of N2? Dr. Sinclair, no, impossible. We're still solidly seeing delta waves in 1-second intervals. The initial darkness fades and the light glows once more. I strain to see into the northwest corner where the night light is, and it blinks off again. No, it didn't go off. A shadow moves in front of it, then away from it, then in front of it again. The machine is beeping to indicate a spike in heart rate. Me, is someone in the room with her? Becky looks at me as if I don't know how to do my job. I'm sorry. Rajiv, the room is locked and sealed, and only Dr. Sinclair and I have the passcode. No one could be in the room. Dr. Sinclair, delta waves still at 1-second intervals, heart rate continuing to increase. The speakers are on, but up until this point we only heard a vague sound of Lillian breathing. I begin to hear something high-pitched, like how whining. It is distant but audible. The shadow blocks out the nightlight again and the room is plunged into darkness. Rajiv, the whale? Dr. Sinclair, it would appear that way. A few minutes pass, with the sleeping quarters in total darkness. I begin to worry that someone is in the room with Lillian, but as this is my first day I do not act. Eventually the shadow moves forward and the room glows a dull amber again. The shadow does not glide or sweep across the floor, but instead seems to lumber, almost as though it is moving with some difficulty. It reaches the end of the bed and casts a surreal, void-like darkness over Lillian's feet. Me, there's someone in there. Dr. Sinclair, we have alarms and security systems in place. There has been no breach. Me, but there's clearly. Becky, look, you need to relax. If you're going to be working for Dr. Sinclair, you need to just shut up and watch and take your notes. This is not the strangest thing you're going to see here. If you can't handle it, you should probably just go. Dr. Sinclair, Becky, it's okay. You remember your first day. Vitals are still good, but heart rate is up to 180. She's still in N2. Rajiv, normally you have to be in N3 to not wake up, when your heart's going that fast. But she's still completely asleep. The shadow begins to move back from the bed gradually. There is a small beam of light that comes up from the bed, and it is like the shadow is moving it magnetically toward itself. The beam of light drops to the ground and begins to follow the shadow across the floor of the sleep quarters. Lillian remains in bed, tucked in, stomach moving up and down. Rajiv, look, there's a second shadow. He points to the area near the sofas, about 15 feet away from the beam of light. There is a smaller shadow there, and it moves up and down, up and down. Rajiv, it's like the light is drawn to the shadow. Dr. Sinclair, or like the light is being dragged by the shadow. We observe as the huge shadow pulls the beam of light across the sleeping quarters, toward the door. The smaller shadow is by the table and chairs where Lillian had her intake, and it bounces toward the ceiling and back to the floor. The high-pitched whine gets louder, and the speakers crackle. Me, we can't do anything to help her? I look at Lillian's sleeping form. She's still there, but I have the strangest feeling that something is very wrong. I do my best to ignore it, as I am supposed to be an impartial observer. Becky, she's fine. Just keep taking notes. Dr. Sinclair, heart rate is increasing to 190. She types something into the computer and the sound of a barking dog plays over the speakers. We'll try to mirror her experience at home, with the neighbor's dog. This should wake her and stop the encounter. The small shadow seems to vanish through the security door, into the southern hall across the way. The larger shadow drags the beam of light through the door. The whining sound stops, and the room's light goes back to normal. The machine makes a small beep. Dr. Sinclair, heart rate is back to normal. She's passing into N3. Rajiv, entering REM cycle. But no, this is wrong. I don't write it down, but I remember, as I'm rereading these notes, how we watched and didn't do a thing to try to help Lillian. We stayed in our safe little chamber and watched as a shadow that was blacker than black moved across the room. At the time, it seemed so insane that I didn't even think there was anything we could do. But now, after everything I've seen, it would have been so easy to intervene. Wouldn't it have? Lillian slept for the next 6 hours. Once Dr. Sinclair was sure her vitals were at a steady level, Becky and I each took an hour break in shifts. During my break, it was midnight. I sat outside on the quad in total isolation, eating a sandwich I had brought with me from my dorm. The whole place was quiet and I was completely alone. I was barely hungry, and I took a few bites before giving up and choosing to stare at the shadows the street lamps created, the buildings and trees and my own shadow. I couldn't stop staring, waiting for them to spring to life. When Lillian finally woke up, something was different. She moved with a kind of confidence. Her posture was better and her face was smooth, free from worry. She didn't smile, and her voice was without inflection. She sat at the table with Dr. Sinclair and Rajiv, and Becky and I took notes. We would get to leave after this meeting. Dr. Sinclair, how are you feeling? Lillian, good. Dr. Sinclair, did you see Petey and the whale last night? Lillian, no. That was such a silly story. I'm fine now. Just fine. Rajiv, you didn't? But we corroborated yours and your husband's story. The data all seem to match up. Lillian, it's amazing what tricks the mind can play. I'm fine now. Dr. Sinclair, we'd like to at least keep you another night, make sure they don't come back. Lillian, I'd like to go now. As I told you, I'm fine. Her eyes look darker than I remember. Weren't they blue? I watch as she stands up, her back strangely straight. She puts on her coat and fastens each button with a kind of stiff formality. Dr. Sinclair and Rajiv are off to the side, talking softly to each other. They can't keep her here against her will, even if they think it's best to continue to observe her. She insists she's feeling well. Lillian shakes the doctor's hand, and then Rajiv's. She exits through the south door, the same one the beam of light traveled through, as if drawn to the shadow magnetically. I look over my notes now and I remember that early morning as Lillian jerkily dressed and exited, nodding mechanically at the doctor. I recall wondering if maybe Dr. Sinclair and Rajiv had cured her, maybe she really was fine. But now, I know better. She would come back a few months later, after I had several more sessions at the sleep lab under my belt. When she came back, I was more prepared. Things that seemed to come from the very fabric of nightmares had presented themselves to me in that sleep lab, and I watched them unfold from the safety of a cloistered room, as a distant observer. Dr. Sinclair, if you're out there, I have all my notes and I'm going to keep sharing them. The only way to stop me is to tell me what you want and why you sent them to me in the first place. I'm not going to be impartial any longer.